Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Mind Shifters Radio. Thank you for your patience this last week, and I hope that you enjoyed the pre-recorded shows. Today is Monday, March the 10th, 2025, and we'll give everybody a chance to sign off and back on again. And apologies, I was just getting a text. So last week, Michael was doing the quantum still point and was busy and intensive with people here in Bristol, and that has completed. So we are back live today, and Michael will be with us here in just a few moments. And if you have any comments or questions about anything that you listened to this last week, or if you have a new question, then please feel free to either hit the little call button at the bottom of your screen. It'll let us know you want to talk, or you can type in the chat room. And I'll be monitoring the messages there. Michael will be calling in as a guest since I'm on as the host on the main studio. And we'll see how this goes here in a moment. He did have, and I'm sure he'll talk more about it shortly, but he had a very successful week with 3 people. And Patrick was there, and he also did the quantum still point on Michael. And so I'm glad that he got to experience the work as well. So let's see, we've got a comment. Hi, Joe Bryson. Welcome to the show. And we did have a couple of emails come in that Michael's going to address. And then I'm not sure what he has planned for today, but we'll find out here directly. And I've made a few changes on the website, so please go out and look around. If you find something that's not working, drop me a line at Jeanie, Jeanie, at whyagain.org, and let me know, and I will get it fixed. So I had changed, one of the things I changed was on the schedule under flyers and schedules for events and intensives, so that the quantum intensive and the May intensive that's coming up, it's a 9-day Why Is This Happening to Me Again? It'll be here in Abingdon, Virginia, from May the 23rd to May the 31st. And if you're interested in participating in that, either call us or drop us an email or a text and let us know, and we'll get you registered. So we haven't done live events in a while, so this is your opportunity. We've been doing online intensives, and we do our private sessions through Zoom, and those have all worked out great. The Mind Shifters and Still Point, we do that, opening it up as we speak. We do that monthly, and we've had a few new people to join us on that, and we are thrilled to have you. And just as way of information, it's usually the 3rd Saturday, Sunday of every month. However, Michael is flying tomorrow to go and see our newest grandbaby, who was born on March the 1st, Michael James Albus Ryce was born, and they're doing great. She wasn't due until later this week, and so Michael thought that he would get up there before the baby was born, but he'll be 11 days old by the time Michael gets there, and he's going to spend a couple weeks up there with the kids and helping and getting to spend time with the new grandbaby. I'm going to stay here in Bristol because Ryan is still on leave after his surgeries. He's doing very well, and the doctor has actually lifted the restrictions and told him to just use his intuition, that if he feels like he's getting ready to pick something up and it's too heavy, to stop. He has started driving short distances, still not confident enough to go a long way, so continue to hold the space. So what I do is I'll go over and stay with Ryan and keep Lincoln there. And so since I'm still going to be busy here, Michael will have to go up and visit the new grandbaby on his own. So let's see if Michael's about ready to get on. And we have several listeners, so I'm glad that everybody clicked off and back on. I know with us being gone for 7 days, maybe people aren't used to us being here and are still looking to listen to a pre-recorded show. So hopefully, and we're glad that you're with us, the numbers are increasing, so people are signing on. And it seems like the issues that we were having with Needle last week, where people couldn't get the code to sign in, that has been taken care of. We're now getting notifications when the shows go live. So okay, I'm going to pass off the phone.
Turn this off. I'm on there, it won't let me log in.
Okay, so he's having challenges getting logged in. Hey, Susan. Thank you. What she's saying, welcome back. And we are glad to be back. So I'm going to hand this off to Michael. And welcome back, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and it is awesome to be. And welcome, everybody. Delighted and honored that you're here, and that we get to play again. I hope that the last week and a couple of days while I've been engaged otherwise, that the workshop series that we played has been helpful, and I hope that it has aroused some questions. And if it has, then all you need to do is push that call button. Now, I was on another phone and I was having trouble calling in, so we're still having some challenges with Needle, but we are definitely appreciative of the fact that we have it with us. And I have a couple of questions that that people had emailed in, so I'm going to just answer those questions, put the thoughts out. The first one was, may I hear your thoughts in this health advice in this video? I know we can't all move to El Salvador, yet his scientific-based warnings about the damage of electric light and EMF is quote unquote fearful. I'm wondering if your forgiveness technique can countermand the damaging effects. And there's a link to a video that's done by a neurosurgeon where he's warning about the toxic effects of different certain frequencies of light, blue light in particular. And that how that relates to weight gain, and you might want to do some research if you want to check out that video. His name is Dr. Jack Kruse, Kruse. I've watched a few of his videos in the past, and he's got a lot going on in his world, and touching into a lot of what can I say, heavy duty stuff. But anyway, so my first thought is let's remember the definition of denial in this work. It's so important. It's perhaps the most important principle. It's hard to say that because there's so many important principles, but it's one of the most important if you're ever going to heal. And that is that denial is the act of thinking or speaking as though something outside of us is the cause of what's moving inside of us. And so, as you say in your text, his scientific-based warnings about the damage of electric light and EMF is fearful. So I'd offer that we could get a billion warnings about 100,000 trillion horrible, awful, terrible, disgusting, illegal, immoral things that are happening, and none of those things can cause fear in us. But if we language that's fearful, then what we have to do, we take the next step. Once you deny, then you have to dissociate from a part of your own mind. And that is, in this particular case, would be the part of your mind that is locked into fear. The mind energy of fear, that's really what's going on, has to be hidden. When I say that causes me fear, or I find that fearful, I'm saying to this massive database that I hold within my mind, there's something inside of me that has to do with fear, but I'm not interested. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to know anything about it. I keep it hidden from me as deeply as you can, and generate a picture for me. Give me a thing called perception. Take a little tiny bit of information from my mind and make it into a picture. Remember, this is one of the key things to understand about the human mind. Like your television set, the human mind has the ability to take information and turn it into pictures. If you look inside the antenna or the box that brings your signals into your house, you will not find any pictures. You will not find one word spoken. You can search in there till the cows come home. You won't find a picture or sound, but you'll find information. And the television set is designed to convert that information into pictures and sound. Your mind does exactly the same thing. Everything you hear is generated by your mind. Everything you see is generated by your mind. You can't see anything in the world. You have never heard anything from the world. In fact, there's no such thing as sound. Well, Michael, you're getting a little extreme right now, aren't you? No, I'm not getting extreme at all. The basis of all true healing is it starts out with truth. If we don't know the truth, then we can't repair whatever's out of alignment with truth, which means healing can't happen. So when you say, Michael, well, you're speaking words, therefore there is sound. It's like, no, actually, that's not true. That's what we've been taught. We've also been taught that the sun rises. The sun doesn't rise. It's a fantasy. It's a useful fantasy. We all know what time the earth is going to turn around and when the light's going to start and we call it sunrise, but it's not sunrise at all. It's not true. And if our lives depended on the truth of sunrise, and we didn't know that it's the earth turning, the sun doesn't rise at all, we'd lose our lives over it. In the same way, whenever we function out of something that can be a useful fantasy, if our life depends on the truth behind that fantasy, we're in big trouble. So the truth is, I've got a little flap of skin in my throat. I know how to blow air over it and vibrate in a way that what we call sound waves, frequencies, come out of that little box in my throat. And those frequencies, there's no sound there. We call them sound waves, but that air movement, as a result of the moving of that flap of skin, sets up an energetic pattern, which if you have some kind of a receiver, like for instance, an eardrum, when those vibrating molecules of air hit the eardrum, then the eardrum, because they're attuned to that frequency, vibrates, and that vibration is transferred to some bones that create an electrical signal, and the electrical signal resonates what's in your mind. Remember the story I tell about the Aramaic language? And I haven't shared this one in quite a while on the show, I don't think so. It fits here, and it's a perfect review of a key idea. Let's imagine that we have someone who wants to come to one of our intensives from Russia, but this man only speaks Russian. And we get an email, and the guy says, hey, I want to come and do your workshop, but I don't speak English. Can you help me? I said, well, I have a friend here in town that's coming to the intensive that speaks Russian. In fact, they're one of the best translators of Russian into English and English into Russian in the world. So this is going to be awesome, because I'm sure that they'll be glad to not only pick you up at the airport and house you, because I know they've got an extra room in your house, but they'll be delighted to translate for you. I'm sure of that. So we hang out with this guy in the intensive, and the translator's there, and we get back and forth. And the week is over before we know it, or the 9 days is over before we know it. By the way, in May, we've got a 9-day intensive coming up. The 9 days is over before we know it, and our friend's getting ready to go back to the airport, and you're going to take him to the airport. And I want him to know just, how dear he's become to me. So I say, hey, would you please tell him that I think he's really cool? Now, I had certain brain cells firing in my mind, and I vibrated this little box, and a word came out of my mouth, or what we call a word, but actually all that came out of my mouth were some frequencies of energy. They hit your eardrum, and your mind heard something. And you turned to this gentleman in your best Russian and you said, Michael thinks he's got a low body temperature. Now, you translated my words absolutely perfectly, didn't you? But you didn't say a word about what I meant. You didn't say anything about what was firing in my brain cells because you're listening. What you heard came from the firing of your brain cells. And so when I tell my mind, don't show me the evidence that there's fear in me, but tell me that there is fear caused by something happening out here. Again, I've now dissociated. I've said to my mind, show me no fear. Build me a picture out of my fear of that object of attention. This guy talking about frequencies. And now my mind constructs a world that I see, that I put in front of the truth of the actuality of what's happening. And I see this circumstance, this situation, as a cause of my fear. My mind has taken my thoughts and turned it into pictures. And those thoughts, if they're off base with truth, wherever they're stored within my tissue structure, within my body-mind unit, they're going to create diseases. So when I shift out of denial, dissociation, and projection, so I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, I hide that from myself. And now this person who's resonating what I've hidden, I use what I've hidden to build my brain's image of them. They show up in my mind, in my perceptual construct. Remember the lesson from A Course in Miracles. If you haven't seen it, jump on our YouTube page, look for What is the World, and look at that lesson. It's so profoundly powerful. Maybe one of the most important lessons in the Course. And basically what that lesson, the opening of that lesson says is the world. Now the whole Course is about healing the world. But what world is it? Is it the one that everybody thinks they're looking at out there? Well, that world isn't there. There's something there, but we only perceive what our mind generates for us. Like the person who thinks a low body temperature means you're really, or you're cool, means a low body temperature. So the body's mind is an evidential device. And when I put my fear into my brain's image of someone else, I see the evidence that if only they'd change, or if only something outside of me would change. So that'd be the first step in moving past and healing what you're speaking of. So let's imagine, and I'm not going to affirm that they are or they aren't. It's a theory. There are many people out there who believe this theory is really true, and it may well be that there are certain frequencies of light and energy that are damaging to the human cell. And this man is saying, well, what we're doing is setting up a place in Ecuador where we're going to be, free of that. And as you say, not everybody's going to get to move to Ecuador. So what are we going to do about it? Well, my offering would be, first order of business is you're going to look at what's practical and real for you. Are you going to pick up and move to Ecuador to get to a place that's free of those frequencies? If not, if so, great, then problem solved. If not, as you say, then what you want to do is recognize that there is a solvent available to you for everything that could possibly do you damage. And the solvent is to live connected to and as the active space of a human being, which is love. So when I'm living out of my human life, and my human life is what fuels and runs my human system, then I'm going to be relatively impervious to any damaging energy in the environment. So I would offer, if you're where you're at and you're not moving to the toxic free zone, whatever it is, whatever the toxin is, whether it's a chemical or a political system or a man or a woman or a thought structure or a church or whatever it is, if you're not moving where it's not, then do the next best thing and apply forgiveness. Move every damaging frequency out of your genes that is held from any time in your history. And my take would be that's when you will be best protected from anything that could possibly be in the environment that could be damaging. So that would be my input on that one. And I know you had some thoughts that you'd shared on that, Jeannie. Do you want to add anything to that? Are you with us, Jeannie? Hello, Miss Jeannie. Let's see. I got a comment from you. Okay, well, no thoughts there. But if you are out there in listener land, it would be awesome if you pushed that call button. Oh, oops, somebody pushed the call button. Oh, it's Jeannie. Excuse me, sweetie. Come on in. Okay, you there, Jeannie?
Yeah, can you hear me?
You're loud and clear, sweetie. Yes.
Okay. Um, no, I had responded to that person and said, that if you're in anger or fear or whatever, you can move to where there is no, trigger, but that anger or fear is still in you, and you'll find another trigger. But then I got another email from someone sort of along those lines of thinking that it's outside of them. Theirs was actually about a marriage and their spouse, and that they started out, with in a godly relationship, and that he is now concealing money and banks and social media and a whole lot more. And said he actually has a doctorate in ministry, and he's keeping secrets, telling lies, and that I'm trying to speed read through the email.
Right. Okay.
Says, this is not a person I can talk to about anything like this work, because it gets pushed aside, and then all of a sudden he curses me out. If I bring up anything that he doesn't like, then we don't talk for days on end. I'm at my end. I can't stay focused. What do I do? The marriage used to be godly. Now it's only lies. And my response to her was, perhaps ask yourself why you feel this is what you deserve, or that things can't change, or this is my plight, or what happened to our communication. We all play a part in our creation. If one feels they deserve punishment of some kind, then they will bring in someone to do just that. It's like playing tug of war. You let go of your end of the rope, it changes their game, whether they want it to or not. And you have to work on your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, not on what they are doing. You can't change them, but you can change you.
Good input. And let me is that your complete thought on that, sweetie?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Well, let me add some thoughts to that for that email that you just shared. And that would be, let me go back about 40 years ago when I used to keynote at a conference called Global Science. And one year, a gentleman named Marcel Vogel came to the conference to present. Marcel is a 23-year senior scientist from IBM. Absolute genius being, not just a genius mind, but a genius being. This man lived in being, having had a personal relationship with him. And this is a guy who, at 11 years of age, 11, invented chemical light. This is the kind of mind he had and awareness he had. And if you go to say a football game and you buy a light stick, there's a plastic tube and there's a plastic or glass inside of it, that when you break them, the chemicals that are in the glass mix and they light up. So that was Marcel Vogel's invention at the age of 11. His family didn't have the money to patent it, so Marcel, at the age of 11, patented that invention for himself at 11. Pretty bright guy. And the reason why we're talking right now is because Marcel invented the magnetic coating. He worked for IBM, the magnetic coating that allows your hard drive to store information. We wouldn't have hard drives if it weren't for Marcel. So that's the kind of mind he had. But the point of what I'm sharing is to recognize, and this affirms from the point of view of a godly relationship, that you are a creator, as is your husband. And when you recognize that you are not independent of what's happening in your world, and you have some form of pain-based hostility, fear, sadness, grief, loss And I could imagine with that story, there'd be a lot of those energies for most people. Maybe not for you, but if there are, that would be the place to start working, because here's what Marcel Vogel showed us. He had a thing called a Delaware camera. And a Delaware camera is different than your average camera where you click the shutter and the aperture opens and the whatever's in front of the aperture in the way of light energy registers on the plate. If you're in a dark room and you click the shutter, nothing registers. So there have to be energetic frequencies there to register on the photographic plate. Well, the Delaware camera is made by an Englishman named George Delaware, and it has a tuning mechanism between whatever you're taking a picture of and the aperture. So just like a radio tuner, you can attune it to different frequencies. And if you take a picture of something and it's attuned to the right frequency, you will get whatever that frequency is registered on the photographic plate. So example, one of the pictures he brought is a picture of that was taken of an acorn. Tuned correctly, the picture, when you took a picture of the acorn, what showed up on the photographic plate was not an acorn, but an oak tree. Now, the average person who wouldn't understand the physics of what's going on would say, well, that's just ridiculous. How could you get an oak tree out of an acorn? Well, what else would you get out of an acorn? I mean, have you ever planted one? If you've planted one, did you ever get a Volkswagen growing out of the ground, or an apple tree? You planted an acorn. Did you ever get a pine tree? Did you ever get a flower? No. What did you get? Every time you planted it, you got an oak tree. Therefore, the pattern, the frequency, the energy of the oak tree must be in the acorn. You put it in the ground, and there's an instruction set. And I mean, if I put a strawberry 1/32 of an inch from the acorn is going to grow into an oak tree. It's going to take the same water, the same earth, soil, minerals, air, sunshine, and it's going to build an oak tree. And right beside it, all the same components except for what's inside the strawberry seed. And it's going to build a strawberry out of all the same things. Obviously, much like, I'm in a room right now, there's a television set. Television set's not turned on, so I might be tempted to say, well, there are no pictures or sound in this room. But if I turn the TV on, a tuning mechanism that can attune to the frequencies that are here, if I have the right decoder, then I'm going to be able to decode from what seems to be nothing, 1,000 different TV shows, radio shows, music, all sorts of different things. So the point, the upshot of Marcel's presentation that day was, look, here's the picture I've taken of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. That's creatorship. And if you look at, in particular, all the things in your world that you don't want, and if that's the focus that you have, if I say, don't think about the color of your car, what moves in your mind? Well, if I ask 100 people in a workshop that question, 99 are going to put their hand up, and I say, what are you thinking about? And they're going to say the color of my car. Or I get the odd wise guy that's been in one of my workshops before when I've asked that question, and that wise guy say, well, I'm not thinking about it. It's like, well, really? Well, what is it you're not thinking about? Well, obviously, it's the color of your car. You're not thinking about what fires in the mind. Excuse me, my other phone just went off. So recognize that if there is pain and suffering, which I suspect there's probably a significant amount of in this relationship situation, and I would suspect there would be things like loss, and maybe, why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? An early power person message that a lot of us get, especially in households that consider themselves godly, because like the situation you're talking about, while one is aiming for godliness, everything that's unlike godliness has to be handled. It's got to be dealt with. And so out of pain and, deceit and sadness and grief come all sorts of things. So my suggestion would be to start to do worksheets on your pain and I'm just going to put this out as an example. This may not be accurate, but I suspect if I were in your shoes, this would be accurate for me. I'd be doing some forgiveness work around the sadness and the grief at the loss of this wonderful God relationship that I had. And I might be saying, I don't want to lose this. Now let's go back to Marcel Vogel. If I'm saying I don't want to lose this relationship, what's the energy, the high energy wave that's coming out of my mind? It's about losing this relationship. And so there's an interactive phase where I become the energetic pattern that draws to me loss. And as I clean that up, and you've got to be careful because somebody can interpret that as, oh, so you're blaming the victim. No, you'll note if you look at the forgiveness process that we use, the worksheet, it's a no fault forgiveness process. There's nothing about fault, blame, guilt, or anything else. It's just responsibility. I am a creator, and everything that shows up in my world. So what part of my mind says I don't deserve this, I can't have it, I lose, whatever it is, and that would be the internal work to do. Now, externally, what I would suggest is one of two different workshops that you start to work with. The core, what I hear you speaking of with, oh, I can't say anything because then we don't talk for days. I would suspect when I hear it in a couple situation, I think back over hundreds and hundreds of couples that I've worked with, in a couple situation when I hear someone saying, well, if I bring up the wrong thing, we don't talk for days. What is going on there is the languaging resonates blame within the partner's mind. And we, in that workshop communication, did you hear what I think I said? And you could go online and you can order the DVD. There's a 2-hour DVD or there's a 4-hour CD, or you can get an online streaming purchase of them. Then starting to work with moving out of what we call projection communication into responsibility communication. The difference in that is I have an issue. I suspect if he separates and goes into upset when you bring anything up that he's doing, that probably he comes from a power person dynamic where he's experienced a whole lot of blame, shame, guilt, which again, if you're talking about a godly relationship, probably meant there was a strong religious upbringing. And oftentimes the religious upbringing is about all the things that we should never do. And we get programmed and brainwashed about all the things we should never do. And then in order to save us from all those things we should never do, guilt gets programmed into the mind so that people will never do that. But that's a mega major mistake that turns things backwards. Because when you think in terms of energy, it's what's got the highest oomph in energy that we're attracted to do. So if I'm told never do this, never, 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 then that builds up a high level of energy. And whatever this is going to be one of the first things that comes up in my mind and inclines me toward behavior until I apply forgiveness and start to let go of that. So as you move into and shift out of projection communication, and projection communication, it goes like, yesterday when you said that, or when you lied about this, that really hurt me. Well, what I just communicated to this person, if they've been in a guilt and a blame power person dynamic, what I've said to them is, you're to blame for what's going on inside of me. And the truth is, no, they're not to blame for what's going on inside of me. I'm not to blame for what's going on inside of me, but I certainly am responsible for what's going on inside of me. Now, most people in the non-being world hear the word responsibility and they say, you mean I'm guilty, I'm at fault, I'm to blame? No. You'll notice in the word responsibility, there's nothing about guilt, fault, or blame. It's just there's a part of me involved. And when I can take a hold of and start to change what ends up being a high energy wave that people around me respond to, I like to call what Marcel Vogel was able to measure with his Delaware camera, the psychic megaphone, or the creative wave that moves out from us. And if the person in front of me has anything that matches that wave, don't ever be angry with me. If they have anger, then my request, don't ever be angry with me, is going to resonate their anger. So moving from projection communication, what you said really hurt me, into responsibility communication. What's that look like? Well, there's a whole, that's the subject of a whole workshop, but in short form, that communication looks more like, I have an issue that I've got going on. And if there's a lot of history, which it sounds like there has been, of, these times where there are days where you don't talk because stuff is in both of your faces, it'll take a little bit of time to shift into a level of trust. But that responsibility communication in that situation will look more like, I've got an issue going on in me that I'd really like some support with. And here's what's going on. Yesterday you said thus and so. And what that brought up for me was a whole lot of hurt. And, I don't know why I'm carrying this hurt. I don't know what's happened, but I'm ready to be finished with this hurt. And I'm willing to own that, sometimes in the past when I've been hurt, I've lashed out at you. And I realize that maybe I've hurt you too. And I'm going to apologize for that and ask if you have any suggestions on, how I might deal with, how I might heal this hurt inside of me. I realized I had it before I ever came into this relationship, and I'm ready to be finished with it. And as I start to own my own rage, guilt, fear, hatred, vengeance, when I start to own those things, and they're things that we all have, nobody's exempt. I don't care if you've got the most powerful person in the world with the most money in the world, nobody's exempt from hostility, fear, rage, guilt, grief, drama, trauma, fraud, all the things that go with the hostility and fear-based mind. The objective of this work is to, number one, take on the task within ourselves of cleaning up that mind, of owning that any form of hostility or fear means my mind is using corrupt data. And when the mind is using corrupt data, my offering, and this can sound like an offensive thing to people at first, especially if they've got offense around these kinds of ideas. But here's my offering. If my mind is using any form of hostility or fear to produce my pained perception, the construct of my mind is using corrupt data. And when the mind is using corrupt data, the mind is suffering from a mental illness. I know mental illness has a certain connotation in the world, but it can be very powerful to admit that if you're in hostility or fear, if I'm in hostility or fear, when I could admit, oh, here we go again, this is my mental illness. And I'm ready to heal this. I'm ready to be responsible for it. And then I come out with responsibility communication. Yesterday when you said thus and so, that brought rage up in me. And I realized that rage is my mental illness and I want to heal it. Got any ideas? Do you have any support for me in that regard? And, start to move in the direction of using the tools. And as you do that, then the whole game changes, would be my offering. So I hope that's helpful. And if it is, and you're on the line, if it works for you, and you can keep your name private, you don't have to use a real name if you want to speak. Then we're here happy to process that with you. And if you were on with us personally, we'd get probably more personal input on how you can use these tools to shift and change this relationship back to the godliness that it started out to be. One of the things that I think is a really important principle to recognize is that if I want to climb to a higher state in my life, everything in me about that higher state has to come up and be processed through and healed. If I have lower energies, if I say, oh, I always want to be loving, like who doesn't? Yes, we all want to be loving all the time. But if I have rage and guilt and fear and sadness and hatred and vengeance, and I go, I'm going to be loving, then sooner or later, that sadness here, grief, rage, vengeance is going to come up. I think one of the most destructive things the church has ever done is tell us that Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. That's been a horrendously, horribly destructive thing. Why? Michael, that's the core of the teaching, isn't it? No, it's not. No, the man never said love your neighbor. The man never said love God. That's a total mistranslation. If you go back to the Aramaic language, what the man said was, have rakhma when you think of the Creator, when you think of neighbor, and by doing so, you maintain yourself. Rakhma is a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that, when active and open, brings love, human life, into your human form. So he said, keep that gate open so that whoever you face, the creator or neighbor, you maintain your human life. That is the presence of love in you. You function from love. It's not about loving your neighbor. That, almost every key word in Yeshua's teachings has been turned backward by the Greeks. Forgiveness became, I'm going to let you off the hook, rather than, oh, there's fear and pain and rage in me, I'm going to remove that fear and pain and rage. That's forgiveness in Aramaic. Love has become something about, either putting your head on the chopping block and allowing yourself to be sacrificed. Look, I love you because I'm sacrificing myself for you. Or it's sexual athletics, all kinds of crazy definitions. Love is human life. It's our created essence. Hold a newborn child, tap into it. You find the presence of love. That's human life. Yeshua was saying, maintain that no matter what happens in your world with the neighbor or the creator. And neighbor, by the way, in Aramaic means anybody that you think about. If you can't maintain your human life, you don't have one. And guess what's going to happen? When you come together and say to somebody, we want to create a godly relationship, everything in you and everything unlike your genes, everything in them and everything unlike love in the genes has to come up to be healed. The sad, terrible direction that was given to love your neighbor is such a tragedy, because here's what happens. If my goal is, and I think love is, something I'm supposed to do to or for or about my neighbor, and I have rage in me, let's say, that rage, high energy wave, as Marcel Vogel showed it, is going to radiate out from me, and it's going to tend to draw to me a neighbor that knows how to trigger my rage. So now that I've been instructed I'm supposed to love, and I'm with a neighbor who's triggered my rage, and my rage is puking out all over him, what am I going to do? Oh my God, I failed. I didn't love my neighbor. I just puked on him. Israel never said to do that. That instruction is one of the most guilt-inspiring instructions that's ever been given, and it's insane. If I haven't got the practice of maintaining my human life in the presence of neighbors that resonate my rage and my fear and my sadness and my guilt and my hatred and my vengeance, if those things are in me, and if you're human on planet Earth today, look back at history and stop the pretense that it's not in you. Because in human history and all of our family bloodlines, it's been there. There's been every kind of atrocity you can imagine. And those things are registered within our genes. They were called the sins of the fathers. And most people, if you look at that story about the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years, it was not about wandering in a hot, sandy place for 4 decades. The desert is a code word for the unconscious, people living out of their unconscious minds. Yes, the instruction was there by the church to love my neighbor, and I got all this rage in me, so what am I doing? I'm doing rage to my neighbor. And therefore I'm guilty. Oh my God, God's going to condemn me to hell because I didn't follow the first commandment. No, if I don't know what the first commandment is, the most important and above all, how to maintain rakhma, and therefore maintain the presence of love in my physiology, I am living in hell. If I don't have that, I am living in hell. And hell, in its original context, was separation from the active presence of the love of God. Most people are living there today already. You don't have to worry about where you're going in some future place. And if you go back and you listen to Yeshua's words, he says, you know, if somebody tells you the kingdom of heaven is over there or over there or over there, they're liars. Don't believe it. If they're telling you, do you know where you're going after you die? Say, no, I don't believe anything you're saying because you're totally off base. The man I'm following said, it's here, it's now, it's within me. It's not off in space somewhere if I follow somebody's rules and instructions. It's when I do the work of Yeshua that I clean out all the generational patterns of hell, of hate and fear and rage and guilt and grief and sadness and pain and drama and trauma. And where else is it going to happen but in my relationships? So the second thing I would suggest then is to get the either the streaming or the DVD or the CD of Healing Through Relationships. It's a workshop that is a foundation for what I'm kind of short forming here and looking at how my mind produces its realities, how my partner's mind produces their realities, and are we ready to, have we got the tools to own, be honest with and recognize we each have our own drama and trauma. And as long as we live in denial, what's denial look like? When I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me. You made me so mad. Now I'm in denial. I now dissociate from my mad part. I've now hidden it. Guess what's going to happen the next time my partner talks to me? If I hooked it into my brain's image with them, I'm going to go, you make me so mad. So applying forgiveness, recognizing we each have our patterns, we're drawn together. You know, one of the principles that I express in the Healing Through Relationships workshop is that most people call their relationships love relationships, but they're not love relationships at all. They're relationships based in matching bags of garbage. People who come together who, because of resonance, can totally and completely show each other what needs to be dealt with. The next step is the key, is can we be there holding the space for the other, recognizing that's what's happening, undoing our denial and the pretense that you made me, and I own my own mental illness and go, oh, it's up again. And I create, and there's a commitment there in the Healing Through Relationships workshop. There's a step-by-step commitment for what am I going to do with my mind in order to function as love in a relationship where our matching bags of garbage are bouncing off of each other. So I'd suggest first the communication. Did you hear what I think I said? And healing through relationships. And or the core of what you're dealing with is codependence. And a codependent relationship is where I blame you for what's happening in me, you blame me for what's happening in you, and now we're both in projection. So there is a 90-hour, actually 89-hour self-study video series on codependence to interdependence. It includes 2 personal code evaluations, and the personal code evaluation is a tool that we've developed that shows you where the holes are in your own mind. You know, it breaks people's personal code, and the personal code is a set of rules my mind follows that forces me to do behaviors in certain circumstances. You know, if you've ever had a situation where you say to yourself, well, I don't like that I did that and I'm never going to do that again. What? Now you made that commitment, right? What happened the next time the stress was up and the chips were down? You did it again. If you don't go in and forgive it, the next time it's resonated into activity, your personal code will force you to do that. Or you'll maybe be able to resist it, but ultimately you need to dismantle it. Because most people live in blockage of truth, they can't see. You know, what happens is when we live in blockage of truth, is we make up a lie. What's the lie look like? You made me so sad. Now I have a lie that somebody else know. I've been through this sadness 87 different times with 42 different people. I'm the only one that's been there every time. If I'm honest with myself, I'm the cause of my sadness, obviously. But when I say you make me sad, I tell myself a lie. I'm now living in denial. I dissociate from the cause of my sadness, which means until I take that back and clean it up, I will forever be riddled with sadness. So when I recognize that this is my sadness, I can start to change the game. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll put it in my brain's image of you and blame you. Now we have a codependent relationship. So it's a self-study video series. The personal code evaluation breaks down the areas in your mind, 10 different areas. It looks at stress management, honor of self, honor of others, honors of truth, honor of truth, hostility, fear, will, use of will, what your nutritional status is. And so it breaks it down and shows you where your weaknesses are and gives specific assignments for how to correct those weaknesses. So that's the starting point of the intensive. You do that personal code evaluation. There are a couple of videos that then, once you've done the evaluation, explain it and give you the assignments. Then you go into, it's a self-paced, self-study video series. It's actually 2 online live intensives. There's all the teaching, all the question answer, all the processing going on, and we cover the workshop. Why is this happening to me again? Healing through relationships, communication. Did you hear what I think I said? Mind shifters, and still point breathing. And the power in that 89 hours of self-study is just awesome. You can do it individually yourself, or perhaps invite your partner into doing it and do it together. It's a powerful process to go through. So are you to blame for what he's doing? Absolutely not in a million years. Is he to blame for what you're doing? Absolutely not in a million years. Is he to blame for what's happening inside of you, or vice versa? No. Can you take responsibility for and undo those things so that you can stand literally as that godly person you want to be? And what does godly mean? I live and I function out of conscious, active, present love. Which means when I live and function out of conscious, active, present love, I am creative, I'm abundant, I'm generous, and I hold the space for healing for myself and others. So that's what it looks like. So there are some options of ways you can get support. And of course, if you call into the show, we're delighted to do a worksheet with you. We're delighted to walk you through any and all of the tools and answer any questions that we possibly can based in these tools, so that you can heal through that relationship that is giving you opportunities to look at perhaps things that are genetic, things that are in your own bloodline, how to come out of your own desert. Remember the story again of the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years. How did they get out of the desert? What did they say had to happen? They said the old generation had to die off. That didn't mean everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the causes held in your own mind are going to be shown to you the closer your relationships get. Now, let's add one other little factor to it. You know, we live in a culture that we're told over and over again not to be sexually promiscuous. And people think that's got something to do with, you know, sex is bad, or genitals, or, you know, whatever all the stories are. I love to remind people when they get into the whole, you know, the basic message of the culture is sex is dirty, save it for the one you love. And you look in the scriptures and you hear the Creator addressing that issue. And the Creator, and I can, you know, almost imagine this little Jewish guy going, what? Who told you you were naked? That's what the Creator says in the scripture. Who even told you that? But there's a reason not to be promiscuous. And that is because when you intercourse with someone, when you have sexual intercourse, you exchange genes with them. You just gave them access to your whole unconscious mind, and they gave you access to theirs. When you give someone access, you know, most people energetically, we keep at a certain distance. But when we intercourse with someone and hand them our genes, they now have access to our deepest unconscious dynamics. So the person who we were most attracted to and most, oh, it was just so wonderful and so great and so grand, There comes a point where people say, the honeymoon is over. What does that mean? That means that it's time for the work to begin. You have created you've drawn a perfect partner. Now, let me just offer in just for safety's sake to recognize, if I've drawn the perfect partner and I'm in danger and there's violence, get the hell out of Dodge. Depart that relationship. That doesn't mean that you have to stay there and be beaten or anything else. There needs to be accountability, and safety is of great concern. But to recognize that if I've drawn someone with a matching bag of garbage, they are going to, and then I exchange genes with them, they are going to have access to everything in me, every cause in me. What happened to you out of the desert? The old generation. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. All of the causes held in the mind, and the genes are a part of the mind. Your whole human bloodline and your whole history is part of your mind. What had to happen to get out of the unconscious, to get out of the desert? And that word desert is just a code word for the unconscious. The old generation, all the causes based in hostility and fear have to be removed in order to make your physiology a fit vehicle for love to inhabit and express and be brought into the world. Rakhma is the gateway that allows that to happen. Your human life you were given, the very first breath you took, you were given a human life. You were given the active presence of love. Just tune into a newborn child. You know, we've had the blessing here. Our grandson now has been circling the earth for about 6 months, so we've been hanging out with this newborn energy, and every chance I get, he's on my chest and we're sound asleep, just hanging out in that energy. I have the blessing of a new grandson who's my namesake. That on Tuesday I'm going to be getting on a plane to fly to Kansas City and get to meet and hang out with my new grandson and my son and his wife. So that's pretty awesome. But tap into that newborn energy, and at your first breath, you were given that. If you came into a genetic heritage that takes that away from you quickly through the family system or through the culture, then your work is to reclaim your human life. What the church world calls salvation, like there's some evil force out there that you got to be saved from, is a fraud. Your salvation was given to you at the moment. It's not something you have to earn. You can't earn it. It's your human life. It is the active presence of love. That is your human life. And when they talk about, well, you can't earn it, it's given to you. Well, then what are we doing here? Benjamin Franklin, when he came out of the Continental Congress, said to his constituents there, you now have your republic if you can keep it. You'll note we're being challenged as to whether or not we're going to be able to keep our republic today in this country. If you can keep it. You were given at the instant of your first breath all that salvation can possibly offer. You were given the active presence of love, a human life. Can you keep it? What's in your carbon-based memory? What's in your physiology? What's in your genes? Let's change that commercial, what's in your wallet, to what's in your genes that can rip you off for your human life. And if you exchange those genes with another that now is an expert at showing you what you've been hiding from yourself, showing you your mental illness, when I can own it. Now, there's a big trip in the culture about mental illness. We're not talking about that. We're just saying, if I'm doing hostility or fear in my so-called thinking process, then my mind is deficient in its function. That's called a mental illness. I want to restore proper function. What does it mean? What's the first law of proper function as a human being? You got to have rakhma. You got to be fueled. You got to be powered by love. If you're powered or fueled by hostility or fear, you're dead. Literally, it will kill you. And so this is about restoring human life and living and functioning as we're designed to live and function, as conscious, active, present love. And so we're down to the last seconds. I'm just going to say thank you for joining us, and come play tomorrow, and we'll look forward to seeing you. In the meantime, create the best year yet of your eternal life. It is an awesome gift that you're designed to give to the world. We're here to support you being able to give it to yourself, to your partner, to your children, to your family, to your community, to your culture. Joining you in living as the active presence of love. Blessings.